Amigwich. Bojo and did me morgan a duck. Was an opkin gay go and abe and dismikaz. Gonna be a guk, jabiga, jwat and donjaba. Gnoje and dodem. Nishnabe nini and dao. Nimki aj bekong ninda. So my name is the man who paints the rocks. And I come from the village where the serpents are painted on the rocks. I am from the fish clan. I'm Ojibwe, and I currently reside at Nimkiaj Bekong, which means Thunder Mountain. And I'm just realizing how friggin' cool that introduction really is. It's like I come from a real cool place, and I'm happy to say that. Kintam Shannon.
Ani Paju, Bashquanaquit, Indishnakas, Moose Dodem, Northwest Angle, number 33 in Dunjaba, Nimkiaj Bakong Ninda. And so I know some of yous, and it's nice to see you. I grew up in Winnipeg, and I live here now today.
Right on.
Oh, we're so thankful to have you, and I know the work you've been doing extends beyond our borders, and you've done a lot of work at home for your nation, but also internationally, bringing a lot of focus and relevance to topics that are really important, including education. So maybe we could start with, what do you define education as when we talk about different lenses and what your experiences at the beginning were?
So I think education, when I think about it, I try to define it through Anishinaabemowin, through the language. And when you look at the word education, it's really quite a fascinating word in Ojibwe. Kinamaagewin. Kinamaagewin. It means ke is land. Kinamaage. It means it's showing us something. It's teaching us something. Ge, it means that you're actively doing something. Win is the way of it. So when you think of Kinamage Win, it means the land is actively teaching us as we're doing it. And so to me, that's what education means to me. And, you know, even the word for school, Kinamage Gamagong, you know, it really means the place where the earth teaches you in the hut. You know, it's like really cool. So for me, that's my understanding of education. It's really comes from the land and all of the beautiful things that grow upon it. And I think that sometimes, like in today's world, like in 2023, it's sometimes I think it's hard for mainstream society to really look at education through that lens. Because I think that for the most part, you know, institutions and all of these things that have been created to teach our kids are not land-based institutions. So we always think about, you know, land-based education as experiential, experimental, as something that is not, you know, mainstream. And I think that that's a major hurdle that we have to come over as a society, because land-based education will be essential for the future. I mean, it was always essential, but there was like this colonial wedge that kind of got thrown in there, and now we have to try to figure our way out of it, and out of these systems, detrench, if you will, and start to try and look at how can we incorporate more land-based education. Because when I was a child, you know, learning about the land also meant learning about how to take care of our own selves. You know, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. You know, mentally you had to be strong in the forest. And so there was a lot of tolerance, and there was a lot of time given for healing all the time. And that's part of education. is learning how to do that, how to facilitate that, or how to take care of oneself. And, you know, a lot of our people, indigenous people, went through a lot of trauma. And so that's it's hard. It's been a hard gig. But our people are doing it, and our people are really thriving with healing. And we recognize that healing is a big part of our education because we're constantly healing. It's not like we're just healing from one thing. Life throws all sorts of things at us, and I think education is supposed to help us, you know, get through those hurdles. That's what education is for as well. It's healing too.
Mhm. Um, I remember I asked Isaac, how did you learn all this stuff? Like, how did they teach you? Like, what steps were there? And he said, you know, it wasn't like there was these things, this process and steps. He said, I just got connected. And so that made a lot of sense to me. And I think that land-based education is getting connected. Um, and so I think that should be a part of what's being taught with education for our kids. And the way that the education system is we're starting to see that it's not really working. And for in the Western society, it's starting to be noticeable that it's not working. And so we got to get our kids to, especially our Indigenous kids, because it's their right to go back to the land and learn that way. That's their inherent right. But also for non-Indigenous kids, they should also be going to the land too, and thinking outside the box and all those things. Because we got to get creative. We got to start getting creative and getting our kids to think and getting our kids to come up with ideas and you know, and to learn how to think for themselves, you know, following their gifts, what are their unique gifts, and exploring that and nurturing it. You know, when I was in school, I know for some students, they love school, but I was one of those kids that school was like torture, and I couldn't wait to be outside. And you know, and if I had that opportunity, I would be so grateful for that. So I think that we should be giving our kids these opportunities, and we got to come have these conversations. And how do we change things? We could, uh, you know, join as communities. There's so many, you know, there's so many barriers because some parents, they can't do everything on their own, or the teachers, they can't teach everything on their own. So we got to come up with a different way, because times are changing, and before you know it, everything's going to change. So let's just start now and start preparing our kids for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just like really hit the nail on the head. You know, we are an abrupt, severe, massive climate change. And, you know, ecologically, where we're going right into deficit. Like our biospheres and our hydrology systems are completely collapsing all over the world. And there's a domino effect taking place. And so it's really, really important that we adjust to the times that we're in, and also prepare the young next generation for what is coming. That's the proper education, that's the moral and ethical education that we should be teaching them. And what does that look like? Well, number one, that definitely means being connected. I think that, you know, we have to learn on how to live on these lands here. And that's very, very vital. And indigenous people have that knowledge. They know how to live here on these lands. And so that's very critical for mainstream education and moving forward, is having indigenous knowledge included. So there's always this idea that somehow indigenous people were not educated, that somehow we didn't have complex knowledge systems, that that we were somehow in deficit, or we were defective somehow. And that's not true. Indigenous people had such a high standard of education that they were able to live on these lands for thousands of years without driving it into an ecological catastrophe. And so they really have a really high standard when it comes to education and morality. And so I think that, today it's really important that we build bridges and that we work on relationships. And also healing is important, because when we can come together in a good way, then we can absolutely make massive changes. People think that somehow that it's all the little changes add up, which is true. But it's also organizing, and it's creating movements, and it's creating, wide open spaces for change. And sometimes it takes people to organize and strategize, create think tanks on how they can change things. And we have to remember too that change doesn't come without sacrifice. Like, we can't expect things to change without pushback. The whole system, the whole colonial Western education system will push back on that. The globalization of Western education is there for a reason. It's to support resource extraction. So when you look at the big picture, it's to support resource extraction. And we know this because all over the world, indigenous people are being colonized en masse, on purpose, and forced into Western education. And then they get tunneled into, of course, the great big blanket of consumerism and all of those things, which is dependent on resource extraction. And that somehow, that makes us successful, which it does not. And so this horrible experiment has gone wrong, and Western education has not been able to produce a sustainable economy. And I think that our kids deserve that. And I think that can only be done together. So that means creating good spaces, having good dialogues, and doing good things. If we want to have a beautiful future for our kids, then we have to make it for them. There's no other way.
So,
We
Isaac,
have to physically make it for them. Yes.
you have we'll say a captive audience of people who want to make that change and want to be a part of the movement, and Indigenous educators. So when we talk about like putting action into, whether that's classrooms, whether that's organizations, is there something we can do now to instill that the start, or I guess the continuance of the work that our ancestors and the people that are continuing to place education first? How would we, I guess, include that in today's principles and understanding of education?
Well, I think that that's one of the biggest challenges is actually accepting that we cannot put this into colonial boxes and frameworks that the province wants us to do. That there has to be an assertion, that there needs to be an assertion of rights and responsibilities. And so I think that that's really important that Indigenous people do that, because as nations, we are responsible for our own education, and that we are determined that. And so I think that with Indigenous people doing that, and welcoming people in is really important. I think that if, I've been working with education for almost 30 years, and I can tell you the struggle is real. Like, I remember back in the days when we used to go out hunting, and we'd have kids in the back of the pickup truck we'd have our guns out, we would go moose hunting, and it was a different time back then. And just things really got wound really tight over the past while. Now you can't even take kids ice fishing. It's really hard. You got to jump through hoops and
It's a lot of red tape.
a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. But I think that because things are so severe, ecologically, we have to make a stand. We have to demand and stand up for what's right. And I don't think that, you know, having us included into that system and being molded and shaped by that system is gonna work. I think that everybody's tried that. I think that we need to create something different. So I think that instead of, tearing down the system and trying to create, making that system work, I think that we have to create other organic systems from the ground up. And so building our own land-based schools and education facilities is going to be really important for the future, because where are kids going to go? And so that's why I think that, coming together and creating those spaces is really important. And it can be done, and people are actually doing it. There's amazing land-based education facilities that are popping up all over the place, and it's really incredible.
I was going to ask about yours because you have a beautiful camp, and I've seen some of the pictures and the work you guys have been doing and expanding, and the services you're offering are just phenomenal. Can you just share a little bit about that for us?
Yeah. So we have a place called Nimkiashbekong, which is a land-based language camp community. We've taken land back, which was known as Crown land, quotations, Crown land. And we actually started to build our homes here, and we built our community center. And, absolutely 100%, you got young people that are doing moose, they're brain tanning moose hides, they're out fishing, they're out hunting, they're out making baskets, and like everything that they can possibly do, they're doing it. And it's really great to see young people engaged that way. And, we had to fundraise. We never used any government funding. I think it would have been easier to do it that way, to be honest with you, to get the government funding and all of that stuff, because we had to like sell art in parking lots, and it was a big challenge financially to try and accomplish this, but we were able to raise the money to do it. And, and now we're set up. And so it's really incredible when you have really good people with you, working with you. This Nimki Ajbekong is not an Isaac thing, it's an everybody thing that's here. And, we're just continuing the visions and dreams that our elders had for our young people. They've been talking about this for a long time. I remember like Dan Pine Sr. used to talk about it all the time. Peter O'Cheese used to talk about it. The late Dennis Thorne used to talk about it. My grandfather used to talk about it. My grandmother, they all wanted to have something like this. And so, I say, oh, just put your tobacco down, put your head down, get to work and go. And don't stop until you're done. There's no other way. We had challenges with the government, we had challenges with the police, we've had challenges with people. And so we've had challenges politically. But I find that when you do things in a good way and you keep focusing on building something good as opposed to trying to take down something that's not good, the energy is different. And we prevailed because of that. We just focused on the positive and just kept making beautiful. That was it for the young people. And so now people know this as a place of education, of healing. They know it as a place of detaching from colonization and embarking themselves into a beautiful journey of language and land. And so that's our home here. And I think when you really want something, you have to feast and nourish it. You have to make offerings all the time. And I think that made a real big difference. But to believe it, I only have a grade 5 education. Like, I'm really not the sharpest tool in the toolbox. I'm going to tell you that right now. But when you surround yourself with a whole bunch of really good people that can do stuff that you can't, then you can get a lot of stuff done. So strategy, I think,
Mm. Yeah, not everybody can pull that off, but everybody can try. And yeah, find people who can do things that you can't. Find people who are thinking the same things, who are maybe on their way to doing it. I know there's a lot of um people that are already taking kids out on the land in their groups, and maybe to find out who they are and collaborate. Lots of collaboration. Isaac only has grade 5, but he's very good at math. I just thought I would mention.
Hmm.
He's actually a math wizard.
I am a bit of a nerd. When I was a teenager, I used to go to science fairs. I didn't know how to read, but I loved hearing about it. And when I was 27 years old, I went to Gabriel Dumont Institute because I was illiterate, and I actually learned how to read um, at that Gabriel Dumont Institute. And yeah, I think education comes in many different ways. But I also wanted to say one thing. We would be wrong if we didn't, acknowledge some of the real awesome stuff that's happening in mainstream education too. So I just don't want to completely destroy it and say it's no good and it's just it's killing the whole world. Like I want to say that there's a lot of room in there with technologies and sciences that are really, really just astounding, and that there's a lot of young people that really want to take on some of those challenges. And that when you look at the big spectrum of change, when you look at the big color wheel of change, it takes every shade of every color to be moving in the same direction for it to work. And so I think that we have to acknowledge that there may be people that are going to become lawyers that are going to challenge these systems. There's going to be people that are going to be superintendents that are going to challenge these systems. There's going to be people that are part of unions. They're going to challenge these systems.
Or people that will come up with better solar panels.
Yeah, or better solar panels, which would be a really good idea. So I think that, I'd like to acknowledge that change is really big, and that it's a big spectrum, and that it's important that even if we don't agree with how we get there, that we still support each other anyway, because that's what a movement is. It's a whole bunch of ideas moving in the same direction. And that's the kind of a movement that we need, is one where we support each other and support different ideations. I think that's really important moving forward.
Mhm.
I have a lot of family that is from a younger generation, and it's so different from them, even for a couple of years, for us to find that balance between technology and going back on the land. So, is that something that you've noticed a big change in your discussions? Is like, how do you balance technology and the science that can happen with it, but also being mindful of the land and the teachings and being there in spirit, right?
I think that's really, really harder for the generation below me and below them even. I think that, when I was a kid, there was no computers and there was no cell phones, and we played with stones and rocks, and we played in the bush all day, and that's the way it was. We played outside, like our parents had to go look for us to drag us inside the house. It's a different world today. And I remember an old man uh told us, he said that the computers and the phones and all those things, he says they're going to cause a lot of problems. He says, and there's a bad spirit in there. That's what he said. And the spirits told him that in a G-Scon, in a shaking tent. He said, there's bad spirits in the computers and the phones. He says, one day you won't have them anymore. That's what he said when they started to come out. And those were his dying words. He told all of us that. He made a point of telling us that we can't always have that. It's not always, and it's not going to be forever, and it's going to take a lot of lives, he said. And so I don't know really what he meant, but I just remember that resonated with me. And I see our young people today being completely detached from the land, and it's not their fault. And that there's a whole community online, there's a whole culture online, and it's completely evicted them off of the land. And I think that, it's no good. I really believe that. I believe that technology can be used as a tool, but I think that it's not being used as a tool. I think it's being used as more of a social networking thing, and that, people are trying to create as many online resources as they can because that's where kids are. But it's such to me, it's not the most constructive way to learn. And so I think that we have to like really try to navigate our young people away from the computers. I mean, they can't be on them 9 hours a day. That's not right. I guess it's not right.
Yeah.
They have to be off the computers. They have to be able to do real things. And so I think that as a teacher, it's wonderful because you can just like, you can put kids online and get them teaching and learning and all that stuff all the time.
Yeah, and kids learn so much. Like they can learn anything online. On TikTok. You see lots of things on there.
It's like they're so quick now because of it, eh?
Yeah. But that's the thing is, a lot of this generation of kids, like even my generation, we think we know everything. And
It's true.
we think we know everything, and we have to relearn how to respect the elders and listen to the knowledge keepers. And that's how our education was respecting the elders, respecting the knowledge keepers. And I think that's kind of what's missing right now. I think we got to go back to those basic teachings so that kids aren't always respecting the computers and respecting TikTok only. So that's just something that I was thinking about, because we got to go back to them respecting the old people too.
There's a great comment in the chat saying kids often say their favorite part of the school day was recess because they got to go outside and they got to be active and in motion. I know my favorite time was recess. I enjoyed recess a great deal.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was younger, I was a Scabewis to my mother at an early age. I was told not to go to school anymore. So I was sent to go live with this medicine man. And my grandfather said, you listen, and listen, because that person's going to be gone one day. And so I never really had a voice. I was always listening. And I remember one time I was a teenager and, I thought when you're a teenager, you're invincible. You become a bloody King Kong and you just think that you're the toughest and you're the most invincible person in the world and that you know everything. And I mean, that's how it was for me anyway. But I remember the elder said, you will have your time. Just listen. There's so many beautiful elders that are talking. Listen to them. They're not going to be here forever. And so as a young person, it's not that I didn't have a voice. I had ears and that I needed to use them. And I think that was really beneficial. When I got older, I was able to use my voice. You know, it's almost like I got permission one time. You know, go speak over here, go do this. Before that, it was my turn to listen, watch, and do things with my hands and learn and work and to be told what to do. That was my job, you know. That's how I learned. That's how I got my education. And you start to think and you start to develop your own thoughts and you start to develop your own ways of knowing, I guess, through that. And that was really beneficial, listening and being quiet and not saying anything. That's that was how we learned as children. And I think today that that's really important that our old people are included in the education because how can it not be? You know, how are elders excluded? You know, we bring them in to do a prayer, to tell a little story, we give them an honorarium, then they go home. You know, that's not how it was when I was growing up. You know, you had to work for the elder and you had to weed the garden, you had to plow those potatoes, you had to work. And that was a part of our education. And I think that's missing is the working and the listening. And it would be nice to get our young people back to that.
The physical work.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was in class, staring out the window, waiting for the bell to ring. That was my favorite time of school. That's what I remember. I think I probably learned a lot during recess.
Did you watch the clouds?
Watched the clouds, played with bugs, just played, had fun.
So we have a question, just really
Mhm.
quickly, that kind of touches on what you talked about. When we talk about how much disconnection there is from the person and the environment and kind of the land that we're talking about, is there like a clear pathway that you see to how we can educate children really well in a good way? And I guess how would that look to you? Is I guess there's no one size fits all, but that's for you to share.
I think for me, I have I have in my imagination, I see like kids being free. And when we see that they have a certain gift and we nurture that and it's our job to pick it up and nurture it, get them to nurture that in the way that they want to outside and use the land to do that. And kids have so much energy, like being outside is good for them. Um, building things outside, using their mind, using their brain, learning how to build things and make things, figuring things out, working with other kids outside, and just being free.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Indigenous education really is like that. If there's a young child that is gifted in one thing, and we know that that's their gift, and we support them and we provide them with all of that knowledge. We hook them up with people. Like I got sifted around all the time because that's the way it was. They were trying to build up my gift. And that's something we don't see today. It was more organic back in the day. And so when I think about how do we move forward today, I keep thinking there was nothing wrong with that, what we did a long time ago. There was nothing wrong with that at all. They even prayed all the time too. They'd pray for me. And they'd have ceremonies and they'd ask questions all the time, about certain kids or kids, what they're gonna do. Where are they gonna go? Those types of things. And ceremony was a big part of finding out and things about what we're supposed to do with our lives, our names and our clans and our helpers and all of that. You know, that was all done ceremonial in ceremony to guide us to what we had to do with our life. And based on those things, we got educated to learn about those things, about our own true real path here on earth, so that we can maximize what we're supposed to do. And I think that it's, you know, so colonization has been so hard because, you know, how can you possibly do that today? You know, how can you possibly take a classroom of kids and do that? And so what is the clear path forward? I think that people need to be able to create spaces where they can do that. And people are doing it. You know, just recently, you know, I was asked to build a great big wigwam for teachers so that they can take their kids out there and have culture camps and land-based learnings and ceremonies and all sorts of things. And so I've agreed to build that big wigwam for them because that's what they want and that's what the kids want. And so I think there is no clear-cut answer. It's where you are at. Some demographics, some areas are way more advanced than others due to politics, due to economy, due to a whole bunch of things. You start where you're at, and but we can never really achieve anything. You know what, Nimki here, healing is a big part of what we do here. Like all of us go through healing all the time so that we can be good to each other, you know. I'm not saying we're not going to be good to each other if we're not healing, but it's important to keep on top of that stuff, keep tip top. And so healing is, if you have a bunch of dysfunctional people, it just takes one real toxic son of a gun, you know, to bring the whole thing down, you know. And so, and sometimes that's us. We're the toxic ones. We don't even know it. So I always tell people, let's heal. Because if we have good people working together, that's the start. Because if you have a bunch of toxic people trying to do something, it's it's very difficult. I know. So there is no real answer to that question, except start where you're at, and if it requires healing to move forward, I would say that's where you need to start, is healing. Because how can you work effectively as a group or a team if everybody's all buggered up? You know, I was like that. I was all buggered up trying to do all this stuff. I had to go fix a whole bunch of broken things inside of me if I wanted to be successful.
I think
I
also
I
it's
have
a
a
good idea
question.
to have.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's Ralph Robinson from Michikamak, Cross Lake, from the north. And in that name, and I'm hearing you. And I can say, Nagiton, that we were on the same boat. Right? Pero nito ipusin na, no? Ipegi-piali magi sa Peupigyak. It was a hard journey, hard life growing up. That's true. As young as the baby of the family, I used to take the role of the man when my dad would go missing. I should say, I guess I can say that, right? My dad would go on a drunk. And I didn't understand why back then. I just started understanding a while ago why. Ako yung nagisig ipenis to taman kaya ko na yun si Minigate. I understand why now. I understand why he fought while he was sleeping. I understand why he had nightmares every night. I never understood. Just recently I started thinking that's why. Kahit tuwing naman minawin ka ito naman. You're looking for that healing. That's where you're gonna find it. Away from everything. Away from this thing we're looking into. This is what's killing our youth. These handheld devices that we buy. Why do we buy them? Why do we pay that monthly bill when it's killing our children? It's taking away who they really are as a person.
Wow, top way.
When you tell them, they lose that healing.
Mm.
And builds up, it builds up, it builds up. I that sickness from these handheld devices. There's so much you can see. You can see the world in the palm of your hands. All you have to do is type it in.
So Ralph, I'm hearing that you really resonated with what Isaac said.
Tinigi.
When I was growing up, 8, 9 years old, when my dad would be gone, I had to take the role of the man. I had to go down the lake, get water. I had to go outside, blizzard or not, to chop wood and haul it in and keep the wood stove going. That's how life was. And being the baby of the family, I never got to enjoy the outdoor life when my dad would go out. Because my mom wanted me home because I was the baby. She didn't want me going on these trips. My brother got to go, right? So as life went on, I started learning and learning, learning and learning. Now I do everything. Like tonight, I'm gonna go sleep at the campus. Our grade 2s are going there tomorrow. We have to keep that place warm. I just got back a while ago, filling up the wood stove.
Ralph, I want to honor your story sharing.
Hi.
I also want to honor the space that we have for others. I'd love to connect with you if that's okay. I just want to be mindful that we have about 9 minutes for others to jump in and to share some comments, and I do need to do.
I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
know that.
I'm happy that you shared, and I'm sure we all are. There's great wisdom, and I know a great deal of healing happens when we share our stories. So I just want to let you know that we hear you and we're thankful, and I'm thankful. I just want to be mindful that we do have some other things that we need to be aware of. But miigwech, Ralph, again.
Miigwech, Ralph.
Miigwech, Ralph. I liked what you had to say. This Shin.
Awesome. So yeah, miigwech again for Ralph. And I know we didn't get a chance to do a Q&A. There was just so much good conversation and other questions that were happening. I guess, Isaac, we have about 5 minutes, and Shannon too. Is there some like closing wisdom or a story you would like to share with us? I know you're a storyteller by trade. Something that you feel would really kind of connect with us here today with what you've shared.
Mike, you want me to say something?
Yeah.
Okay,
I want to tell a story.
tell a story. Okay. Long time ago. No, just kidding. I think that I'm going to tell you a real life story that happened. And this is something that transformed how I think in a lot of ways. And I remember one time there was a group of people, there was a group of 30 principals and 36-year-old children. And something happened where some presenters got, they never made it, their plane never landed or whatever. And so they said, Isaac, we need somebody that can deal with 30 principals and 36-year-old kids at the same time. We know you're the one, you're the chosen one. Can you do it? I said, holy geez. I said, I'll give it a try, but holy. So anyway, I decided let's make a chief and council group with each of the groups. The principals can have their own chief and council. The 6-year-olds can have their own chief and council. And their mission as chief and council was to find a way on how baby birds can get clean drinking water. Because I seen a bunch of birds in a slough and I wasn't happy about it. So the adults got together and of course they got their flip chart and they started to like aggressively create this alternative reality. And it was quite impressive. They created their own party. They, had all sorts of policy descriptions and legislative actions that, needed to take place. And they had, the case law and they had all sorts of stuff. And it was really impressive. And they went on for 20 minutes talking about it. And when I looked at the kids, the 6-year-olds were just sitting there singing a song, holding hands. Like, that's it. They didn't even talk. I mean, they might have talked in the beginning, but I didn't hear anything. And so after 20 minutes of all this, I said, let's do the presentation. So I asked the adults if they can do first. And of course, they went through the flip chart, and they talked about everything, about their presentation and how they're going to get water to birds. And it was a really big, like, almost like a massive takeover of the government, and they felt that that was their only alternative and that they had to tear down all of these systems. And, they had to have, I think it was a 50-year plan that they required them to do this. And so I was impressed. I thought it was cool. Then when I went to the 6-year-old kids, something happened that I'll never forget. This little 6-year-old girl stood up and I asked her, how are you going to get clean water to birds? And she says, we're going to give it to them. And in the center of their circle of song and their circle of dance and joy, they had a beautiful clay pot full of water, clean, beautiful drinking water. And they said, follow us. And so we followed them down the hallway, out back of that college or wherever we were, down into this ravine, which was a very poisonous, toxic ravine. And they placed this clay pot of water by this tree. And they horseshoed around it and they sang another song. And then we left. But as we were leaving, somebody said, oh my goodness, look. And there was a family of mallard ducks that came walking up to where we were. And the little baby ducklings went into the clay pot and they were drinking the water out of the clay pot. And I was stunned. I was in shock. Everybody was, except the kids, they knew it was going to happen. They were jumping up and clapping and, it was just amazing. And when we went back, I started to think about what took place. The adults, they used their mind to try to tear something down. But the young people, they did something way different. They used their heart and they took action. They made beautiful that day. That was the difference. Not only did those kids figure out how to get clean water to those birds, but they actually did it in a half an hour. And so I think today that our young little children, they're teachers too. And that, when you look at what they're trying to do, what they're trying to show us, it's important that we listen to them. It's important to look at every stone and every leaf and every frog and every, worm that they bring in. We take a real good look at it because they're trying to tell us, they're trying to teach us education. They're trying to teach us kinamage. And I believe that it's important that, if we keep things from the heart, and then if we keep things in action, moving, doing something, and then we get away from the devices and the computers. Our people thrived without computers for, a long time. And we have to try to get back to that. Our young people are getting, it's gonna hurt them. That's what the old people used to say, and I believe them. But, with that being said, I believe that there's great hope when we do work together and that we build bridges. I mean, actual real working relationships with each other. Because when we do that, we can actually get some work done. And I think that's what's needed now. I think that everybody's just trying to figure this out. And we need your ideas and your perspectives. We need your visions and your gifts. And we need, your thoughts. That's how this works.
Mhm.
And I believe that when people join together and when they want something, they can do some really beautiful things. And I don't think anything is impossible when we join forces, when, using our hearts, then everything becomes possible. And so I do want to leave this webinar in the most precious way I know how, which was Shannon giving the last words.
I want to say that everything is possible.
It is.
Anything is possible. And yeah, let's work together. Let's network and let's imagine. And thank you for listening and coming up with your own thoughts and ideas. And I hope you guys have a really good night.
Yeah, have a good night. Bama pig wabmanim. Meanwhile.
Thank you guys so much for your wisdom and for joining us for our Full Circles community conversation. This is our second one, and we couldn't be happier for you to be joining us, Isaac and Shannon. I didn't get a chance to post the Zoom survey in the chat just because we were dealing with some other sharing and circle that I had to be mindful of. So please do keep your eyes on your inbox for a quick survey. It's about 5 questions long, check marks, just to let us know, like Isaac said, we have to work on this together, and helping us know what you want to see helps us bring the best speakers to you to learn more. So miigwech everyone for joining us again, and miigwech most of all to you, Isaac and Shannon, for sharing your wisdom with us. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you next month for it all over again.
Nishin and Quish Quinan Nog, very much so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Miigwech.
Amapi.
Bama pig.